Reptiles and amphibians boast some of the weirdest, scariest, and most fascinating stories of any animals on our planet. And chances are, if there's a niche available in an ecosystem, there's a herp that's evolved to fill it. From highly venomous ambush predators to expertly camouflaged insect assassins, these cold-blooded creatures have figured out innumerable ways to survive. And today, we're gonna show you some of the coolest of them. My name is Harrison, and this is Evan. We're twin brothers on a mission to help you become an insider in the natural world. And the best way to do that is to dig deep into how the strangest and most unique things in nature actually work. Things that reptiles and amphibians have no shortage of. The state of Florida is one of the best places in the US to search for these animals. But we've come here with one big goal in mind. To track down a snake that has eluded us for many years, the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. This is the largest rattlesnake species in the world, but also one of the most elusive, because habitat destruction and human persecution push them closer to extinction with every passing year. To pull this off, we're going to be spending several days exploring deep into Florida wilderness alongside our good friend and seasoned snake hunter Spencer Hoffman, scouring every location we can think of day and night to even have a chance of finding this infamous serpent. Florida does not give up its herpetological secrets easily, but there's a silver lining to how difficult this search is. When you spend a lot of time intensely hunting for a snake like the EDB, you're bound to come across some other fascinating creatures you weren't expecting to see at all. And that's exactly what happened on this trip to the Sunshine State. Much of our diamondback bycatch has stories that are too cool not to share. And that's certainly true of our first notable find. Because while road cruising through an exceptional stand of flatwoods, Evan spotted a bizarre lizard that is even rarer than the rattlesnake itself.
How do we catch it?
You just don't grab.
Yeah, from the front
So I could use
is
this.
the
See where
answer.
the lateral line ends? That's way more than half his body.
Beautiful.
That is crazy.
See,
There he goes. You got him, bro.
Careful.
okay, I just don't want to have to pinch. He did actually try and bite me there. Hey,
That's crazy looking.
there it is. And then, obviously, just apply no pressure to the tail. And he's chilling. Wow, it's actually crazy. You can really see how much of their body is actually tail because the lateral line, which is the bodily organ they use to crush their food, they can't expand and contract their ribs the way a snake can to handle big prey, so they need to find another solution. And you see this little indentation that runs down the side of his body. That is the lateral line we're referring to. And where that little lateral line ends is where his tail begins.
Show me where the end of the lateral line is.
It's right about there, which on this individual is easily less than a third of the length of his body. Look at how much of this lizard is just the tail. But let's take a closer look at this guy because that is absolutely awesome. Now, we initially called this out as an eastern glass lizard, but we actually confirmed that it's something even more special. This is our lifer island glass lizard, an endemic species here in Florida. And if you're looking at this animal, it's pretty easy to say, wait, isn't that a snake? Are you sure that's a lizard? But in reality, this really is a species of lizard, and one of the best ways to tell is by taking a look at its head.
So I like to say that the appearances we see in nature can actually give us hints and clues as to the animal's biology. This head right here, you can see first of all that he has eyelids, unlike a snake. They're covered by like a layer of scales and that's it. These guys have true eyelids, they're true blinking lizards, and that pointy face there is really, really useful for what they're doing and what makes them so rare. Most of the time, they're spending their entire lives underground, burrowing, I dare say even swimming through sand. And it also is really convenient that they have no legs to slow them down. Once that pointy head can poke a hole in the sand and they push their way through, that slender, tapered body means they can just shoot right into the substrate.
Exactly, and when you see them move over land, they do have that kind of whippy, undulating motion that does look a lot like a snake, so you could absolutely be forgiven for mistaking this animal for a snake. But I am very, very excited to have an island glass lizard in hand for the very first time. Island glass lizards are extremely rare to see. So much so that they're arguably harder to find even than the rattlesnake we're targeting. And like the eastern diamondback, it's not just their small population size that makes encounters with them so uncommon. See, glass lizards are fossorial, so they live primarily underground. And that's particularly important for this species because they lack the critical defense mechanism that other glass lizards are famous for, caudal autotomy, or the ability to drop off their tail to distract and confuse predators. So a bit of context, glass lizards can disconnect their tails so easily because they have unique structures called fracture planes, basically little chunks of cartilage separating the vertebrae in their tail. If a predator grabs the tail, they use specialized muscles surrounding the fracture plane to sever the connective tissue between the vertebrae, leaving the tail writhing on the ground and giving the rest of the lizard a chance to escape. However, island glass lizards don't have fracture planes. Their vertebrae are connected with solid bone, so they can't perform caudal autotomy. Without this ability, they're forced to rely on their speed and cryptic fossorial habits to avoid predators, which is why it's much rarer to see them come to the surface than other species. Finding an island glass lizard is actually a great sign for our diamondback hunt, since the well-preserved, sandy scrubs and forests that they rely on are the same kinds of habitats that EDBs prefer. This means we're on the right track, but day turned to night with no sign of rattlesnakes whatsoever. But while diamondbacks won't move after dark, in Florida things really start to heat up when the sun goes down. And it wasn't long before Harrison spotted a snake we'd been eagerly waiting to see.
Got him?
Yep.
About time.
It's actually pretty exciting because this is our first Florida banded water snake of the year. And for this to be our first water snake is shocking for anyone who spends a lot of time looking for reptiles. And he is quite upset, but I don't blame him. We just pulled him off the road as he's been trying to heat up. Ow, let go. Get some hunting in. I'm not gonna hurt you. Here, I'll let you go. How about that? Now these guys, of course, are totally non-venomous, like all of the water snakes here in North America, at least in their genus. But the cool thing that I love about Florida banded water snakes is they're probably the most generalistic of all of the water snakes we get here. We've seen them in everything from beautiful preserved habitat like this, right into totally urban spaces where they are actually one of the more abundant snakes we get. And check that out. Gave me a little kiss. And the thing about water snakes in the genus Neurodia is, like I said, they don't have venom, but they do have an anticoagulant in their saliva. So when you get bitten, that's just gonna keep bleeding for a lot longer than a normal cut or scrape. But because this guy is quite stressed out, as you can see, we're not gonna hold on to it too long. We will grab some camera shots because this is our first time with a real camera finding a Florida banded water snake. But how about that? Little treat and an awesome first non-venomous snake of the night.
Watching this guy slink back so easily into such a small puddle highlights how well banded water snakes can transition between terrestrial and aquatic habitats. And it's that flexibility that has made them so successful. In fact, while our target eastern diamondback is among the hardest snakes in Florida to find, the banded water snake may well be the easiest, thanks to their incredibly generalist biology. This species can be found in just about every freshwater habitat in the state, from lakes and swamps to urban parks and culverts. All they need is a permanent water source and some healthy vegetation to support their prey populations, and they're pretty much set. They'll eat anything they can overpower: fish, frogs, lizards, even the occasional mammal. And as visual, active hunters that can forage just as easily on land as they can in or under the water, there's basically no limit on where they can find food. This is what has allowed banded water snakes to flourish in the state, something that unfortunately, eastern diamondbacks are not doing right now. EDBs require large, healthy expanses of particular habitats like pine forests, sandhills, and certain kinds of wetlands like cypress swamps, all of which are now greatly threatened by human development that has significantly reduced the amount of suitable habitat available for the rattlesnakes. We concentrated our search efforts on these areas, and after a long afternoon of hiking some pristine sandy scrub, we encountered two frogs that highlight another one of the major challenges facing Florida's native herpetofauna.
Saw this big frog here. I didn't even realize it was a tree frog at first. That's how big this thing is. I'm gonna see if I can. Got him.
Nice.
Look at the size of this tree frog. That's like almost a bullfrog size, at least the bullfrogs I see at home. That is a Cuban tree frog, and it is obnoxiously huge. But the brothers actually need this one, so I'm gonna catch it for them.
Literally a second ago, Spencer caught this massive Cuban tree frog, and we couldn't have written this any better. There is a tiny, recently metamorphed squirrel tree frog. So I'm gonna grab him real quick.
Oh, I was looking at that one.
Oh,
that one's
another
even
one.
smaller.
Yep. But check this out. So what you are looking at is a native tree frog species, a little metamorph. Before he runs away, I'm gonna grab him back. Come here, dude. He got away. There was another one. Here we go. So these are little baby squirrel tree frogs, Dryophytes squirrelis. And this, as I mentioned, is a native species. The Cuban tree frog is not only a very prolific invasive species here in Florida, but is in fact the largest tree frog species in all of North America.
Look at this thing. Huge.
This guy would easily and very happily make a meal of these tiny little babies, and that is exactly what Cuban tree frogs have done all across the state of Florida. In fact, I'm pretty surprised to be able to find native tree frogs, especially these little babies. This is not nearly as big as squirrel tree frogs will get, but they top out at just a couple of centimeters long, maybe an inch or so. But this guy probably was born in the water right off the boardwalk here and is coming out to do a bit of hunting, as is this guy. And the thing about Cuban tree frogs is they do not discriminate about what kind of prey they'll catch.
Frogs in general will eat basically whatever is small enough to fit in their mouth. So the bigger the frog, the bigger the things they can eat. And that's why these invasive frogs are so problematic, because they just get huge. And these guys and the cane toads are also quite toxic. So there's not a lot of native predators that can eat these guys. So you have a big frog that can eat a lot of things and nothing that can eat them. So
Exactly.
the reason they're a problem is not just because, oh, it's not supposed to be here, but it's not supposed to be here and it disrupts everything.
Correct, because a frog that large with the same kind of niche in the ecosystem as the native species can easily outcompete them when it isn't just eating them outright. So we are going to let this guy go far away from where we put that Cuban tree frog back. Unfortunately, there are probably hundreds of these and an equal number, if not more, of the Cuban tree frogs. So there's nothing we can do except to let him go. But we'll let this guy make a quick escape. Hopefully his camouflage and evolutionary mastery of this ecosystem as a native species will help him escape any predation from the Cubans. Unfortunately, this habitat is really quite ideal for Cuban tree frogs, quite similar to their native range in Cuba and the Bahamas and other parts of the Northern Caribbean.
So we're gonna eat this guy instead.
You would not want to do that with how toxic they are. If you have any... That was a crazy jump. If you have any cuts or scrapes on your hands, Cuban tree frogs can actually burn. So that's a species to watch out for sure.
The toxins that Cuban tree frogs have in their skin are incredibly irritating and distasteful to predators, and because of that, there aren't many local species that will eat them. This gives them a major leg up over native tree frogs, and that's just one of the advantages that has enabled their domination of Florida. Cuban tree frogs are remarkably successful colonizers because they reproduce very quickly and in huge numbers. They'll eat anything they can fit in their mouths, and they readily adapt to life in human areas better than native species can. This has led to them becoming the most abundant tree frogs in Florida, and where their populations have increased, the numbers of indigenous tree frogs have been shown to decrease significantly. That's why this observation of Cuban and squirrel tree frogs living side by side is so interesting. This is actually our first time seeing squirrel tree frogs in the wild, because usually the areas we explore in Florida have already been taken over by the invasives. Squirrel tree frogs are one of the most common native tree frog species in the state, but because the Cubans grow 4 times larger than they do and they share very similar ecology and habits, competition between the two species has caused them to become much harder to find in many areas. Oh, and in case you were wondering, squirrel tree frogs get their name from one of their calls, which sounds a lot like the raspy, chattering calls of eastern gray squirrels. This was a cool species to check off for the first time, and these finds really highlight the challenges that native animals here in Florida face from the ever-increasing presence of invasive species. Some reptiles here have such unique lifestyles, though, that there's virtually nothing in the state that can compete with them directly, and that is very much the case with the next snake we found, a bizarre species we've been hoping to see for years.
Snake! What is it?
Are you?
What is it? Grab it. Oh my God, it's a mud snake.
It's a mud
Are
snake?
you joking? Look at it. That's 100%. You can't mistake that.
No way.
This is absolutely beautiful. It's just a little baby. Now this has to have just come out of a shed. Look at how shiny it is. That is by far the most beautiful snake I think I've ever seen. He's poking me with his tail and everything. I am actually speechless. We were joking about seeing a mud snake, but this is absolutely insane. We need to take a closer look at this. There are so many ways this night could have gone. This was not on any of our bingo cards. An eastern mud snake, or a lifer eastern mud snake at that. These are really not conditions that I would have expected to see this snake at all. Mud snakes are almost entirely aquatic, so they're going to be spending most of their lives in and around the water. And really the only times you typically see them moving over land is either during or after very heavy rains. Right. But the conditions tonight are completely clear. It's a very dry and cool night. So really, this, like Harrison said, is not something I would have expected to see at all, but I am so pumped about this. As Evan was mentioning, they are aquatic, which means that people only run across these snakes very infrequently. This is one that we could spend an entire week here in Florida targeting and have no guarantee of finding. So to see not only a mud snake, but a baby mud snake that is perfectly healthy and absolutely stunning is incredibly exciting for us. And one of the coolest things about this animal to me is that they are just as specialized with their diet as they are with their habitat preferences. The name mud snake is no misnomer. They spend a lot of their time hunting in very thick, muddy conditions, looking for large aquatic salamanders like amphiumas and sirens, things that on their own are incredibly bizarre and alien, but this is their worst nightmare. Now you may be looking at those colors and thinking, is this a dangerous animal, a venomous snake? Not at all. They're totally non-venomous, but they have another very interesting way of overpowering the food that they want to eat. The tip of this snake's tail is actually quite sharp, and he's kind of prodding us with that tail as a sort of defense mechanism, but they also use it to subdue their prey. The types of amphibians that they're eating are very slippery animals. They're difficult to get a hold of even if you have opposable thumbs. And for something like this with no legs at all, they really have to use any method possible to keep a hold of their prey and prevent it from escaping. So that sharp tail tip really does come in handy for that purpose. But this is an animal that we have been looking for so many years, and it's actually quite infrequent that Evan and I are anywhere near the part of the country where mud snakes live. So the fact that I am looking at a live wild mud snake is kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Absolutely, and a gorgeous one at that. That is awesome.
Finding a mud snake was a pretty big deal for us, but what's funny is they're actually quite abundant throughout their range. They're just difficult to detect because they spend the vast majority of their time either underwater or buried in mud. They're totally comfortable in this subterranean world, and they can move and hunt very effectively despite being basically blind when they're underground. Instead, mud snakes have an incredibly sharp sense of smell to follow scent trails left by their prey, and they can detect vibrations to pinpoint their prey's location even in super murky conditions. Now you may be wondering why a snake that's almost never on the surface has such brilliant colors. And that's a valid question, because the truth is we don't really know. There's so much we don't understand about the lives of these snakes, but their secretive habits make them tricky to study. We were still very happy to finally add mud snakes to our life list, and really all of these finds were special because they kept us going during many long days and late nights of searching for the elusive eastern diamondback. But despite exploring multiple new habitats and trying a number of different techniques, something just wasn't adding up. We knew we were close to finding our target, but with time on our trip quickly running out, we realized that we'd have to change our strategy. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode, where we document the full process of our rattlesnake hunt. Trust me when I say this is one mission you don't want to miss. But while you wait, if you want to dive deeper into the story of one of the country's weirdest and coolest lizards, check out this video, where we catch an eastern glass lizard to show you how their crazy survival strategy actually works. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.
What? Hold on.
It's gonna be hard to get it out.
Good catch, good catch. Careful, careful, careful.
Oh my god, he's big actually.